Good morning. We want to welcome you to the Grove Church Live. We're joining you on Facebook and YouTube Live this morning. And we want to say welcome back. We have been without you for the last 2 weeks, and I hope that you were able to enjoy some time with family. I guess just family, since we're all still only hanging out with people that are living in our households. But I hope that you had some time that you were able to relax and maybe enjoy some delicious food and some time. We had a couple bouts of snow, so that was fun. The Helpman household was actually quarantined over Christmas, so we got some extra special time, 14 days together in a row. So here we are. Welcome to 2021. We made it. And as we look back and maybe reflect on just the initial start of this year, perhaps if you are feeling in any bit like me, we might be confused, we might be tired, we might be feeling frustrated, we might be feeling afraid. And so, what I want to say to us today, no matter what describes your mood or what describes your feeling, I think our minds are cluttered a bit. I imagine that our anxiety is a bit high. And we're probably absorbing the events of this week in all different ways. One of the things that I like to remind myself of, and perhaps throw out the challenge to you all, is that we have this ability on our own to take the step or take the lead, maybe the initiative, to be the people who usher peace. So sometimes I think we often look for it in other ways. We look for it to come from someone else or in another direction, or maybe in leadership or in organizations that we see. But what I'd like to remind us of today is that we, individually, we also play a role in ushering in peace, whether that be in our immediate circle of friends and family, in our communities, not to mention within our own selves. We play a role in that. We are a part of what that looks like and that feels like in our own lives. And I often think that we kind of negate the responsibility elsewhere. We expect someone else to do it. Right now, more than anything, I think we can all admit that we know we have an opinion. We know other people have an opinion. We've heard opinions. Maybe what we actually need is an example. We need someone who takes the personal responsibility to be the peace, to provide the healing balm, to connect with the Spirit of God, and to recognize that we play a role. We have a part. There's this beautiful poem that is by Sarah R., and she is one of the artists that we used not only in this Advent series that we just completed, but we also used last year when we did her Advent series. And it was called Peace Can't Wait, the series that we did last year. And I was reminded of this poem, and I wanted to share that with you this morning as we prepare to go into a time of worship. I feel as though it will speak to you as it is speaking to me today. Sometimes when the sky is still dark, I slip my sock feet into tennis shoes and I go for a walk. And step by step, I begin to ask my deepest questions. When the sky lets go of its darkest deep blue, I say, am I enough? When the sky goes from ink to indigo, I say, do my children know how much I love them? When the sky goes from indigo to navy, I question, will my friends keep showing up? And the sky from navy to royal blue, I question, will we ever find peace? The sky from royal blue to gold, and after a while my pilgrimage must come to an end. And so I turn my apologetic feet toward home, and I walk my repentance back toward the sun of day. And once again, while I stand in my sock feet and tennis shoes, God takes my breath away. For once again, the sky's deepest void is now a watercolor of light. And I am reminded that like the sky, God touches everything. And I am reminded that like the sky, there is nothing so broken that can't be painted gold. For in the morning light, there is peace. We start anew every day. And I love how this poem concludes where she speaks, nothing is so broken that it can't be painted gold. And we look around right now and see a lot of brokenness. We look around right now and see a lot of holes. And ultimately, the coming together requires someone to be an example, to take the lead, and to acknowledge our role in participating in ushering in peace. So wherever you are, and whatever relationships are significant to you, and whatever people are around you in your inner circle, start there and start today. We're going to move into a time of worship, and we're going to get to experience our very own Liz Nance, raw from her living room, sharing a set with us. And I just love, even though as strange as this time is, we get to see some beautiful elements of the artists that live in our community, our friends, and Liz's beautiful skills in leading us in song. And she's going to begin by singing this song that I believe the words will speak to us today, because we are longing for the shining presence of God to be felt in our souls. And we'll hear those words in this first song. Let me feel you shine. Shine on us, shine on this community and this world. Come and fill the broken places and paint them gold. I'm inviting you this morning to begin this time and worship with us, worship with Liz. Maybe find a moment where you can close your eyes, sing along, and lift these words up to our God today. So join us in worship.
Happy New Year, y'all. This place is trying to break my belief. My faith is bigger than all I can see. What I need is redemption. What I need is for you to put me back on my feet. Whoa, oh, 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 whoa, oh, oh. I swear I'm trying to give everything, but I feel I'm falling. Oh, make me believe. What I need is resurrection. What I need is for you to put me back on my feet. Whoa, oh, 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 whoa, oh, oh. If I could feel you shine your perpetual light, maybe I could crawl out of this tonight. If I could feel you shine, oh, let me feel you shine. So beautiful and warm, so beautiful and bright. The sun coming out of a rainy sky. If I could feel you shine your perpetual light, maybe I could crawl out of this tonight. Let me feel you shine, oh, let me feel you shine. So beautiful and warm, so beautiful and bright. The sun coming out of a rainy sky. Let me feel you shine, oh, let me feel you shine. God, I need a Savior. Oh, come, generous King. God, I need a Savior to come rescue me. Let me feel you shine your magnificent light. Maybe I could crawl out of this tonight. Let me feel you shine, oh, let me feel you shine. So beautiful and warm, so beautiful and bright. The sun coming out of a rainy sky. Let me feel you shine, oh, let me feel you shine. Let me feel you shine. Let me feel you shine. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath
So Happy New Year. I love New Year's regardless of what year it is leading us into or out of. I love New Year's just the way that I love the changing of seasons. I feel like they're transitional times. They're times where you can feel the change. You can feel fresh starts and fresh beginnings and new times. And I just love the newness of that. And I hope that this first week of the new year has given you some hope going forward. I hope you are able to find new experiences this year. I hope you're able to find new spaces, whether that's inside of you or around you, outside of you. I hope that for all of us for this new year. My soul, come away. from mercy. Blow through the caverns of my soul, pouring me to overflow. To overflow. Amen.
Hey, well, good morning. Welcome back. Thank you, Liz, for that. That was awesome. I love when she does that from her home. It kind of feels, I don't know, there's just a different piece to that when she's there. And so, thank you for doing that. And thank you for worshiping with us this morning, for joining us our first Sunday back in 2021. How fast last year went. It's crazy to think where we're at already, 2 weeks into 2021, and I think we're asking for a restart. Most of us, we want to click the button back to 2020 just for a moment, and it's even hard to say that. Who wants more of 2020? What we're going to do today, and starting the next few weeks, is invite you into a conversation from your living room to here at the Grove about the resurrection. And we're going to get into specifically what that means here in a moment. But what I want you to do is I want you to participate. The three of us are going to engage in the conversation, ask some questions, and talk. We're going to ask the same questions to you and get feedback through the comment section there on Facebook. Different weeks we might have different people up here sharing with us and getting some more perspective, but that's kind of what we plan to do for this morning. We've kind of set it up to where we can engage with one another and talk. The camera will flip back and forth to kind of get a better shot, but we're just going to have a conversation here in front of you and invite you to be a part of that. And so here's how we're going to start. Here's the first question for today. We don't necessarily talk about New Year's resolutions all the time. We know that often we don't make it very far with those, but I did want to ask you if there were any new practices, is the word we like to use. Are there any new things that you guys plan to add to your life in 2021? And so I'm going to post that question there on the feed. What are some practices you're trying to implement moving into this new year? And so I'll turn that over to you guys, and we'll hear, and I'll read some come up on Facebook. I'll read those as well.
So typically, like the New Year's Day and like New Year's resolution or practices is something I love. I love a new start. I love goal setting. Like I like the challenge of working my brain that way. But this year has felt really different. You know, it's kind of felt like we're starting, but yet we haven't really moved to like a fresh new place. So I don't have like maybe a typical like, hey, I'm going to do this for how many days, or, you know, that style of goal. But something that I started doing in 2020, and I hope to continue as a practice in 2021, I've been doing yoga every day. And I really got into it in 2020 because I had my knee surgery. I wasn't able to run. And so kind of that being taken away from me, I wanted to do something that made my body feel good, but also like help my mind. So I decided to just on a whim join an online class, and I got my certification to be a teacher. So I went through the 200-hour yoga training. Anyway, so that's a practice that I added, but I'd like to continue. It's helped me mentally, and then also just not having the ability to do what I want with my knee. It's been something that I've been able to participate in and really enjoyed that. Also sneaking away to my basement and hiding from my family because it's loud.
True story. Well, you, Matt, any new practices this coming year?
Kind of like Jody in that carrying some over, I guess, per se. One of the things that I started doing, and I'm really interested in making it an everyday thing, is bringing into my prayer times and my meditation times sacred poetry from different religions around the world and different philosophies around the world. And so I've been doing that since New Year's, and just trying to memorize these poems and these scriptures and these pieces and have them as kind of a continual backdrop in my mind. So there's that.
And I'm guessing you're going to be sharing probably some of those throughout our.
They'll make their way into things, I'm sure. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'd love to share some from the group watching, but nobody put any out there. So, which is awesome, because this is going to like segue into what I want to implement, not just in my personal life, but in the Grove community as a whole. We started about 5 weeks ago, Tuesday nights, showing these guided meditation, these contemplative prayer moments for you guys to be a part of, to kind of unplug from your day and tune into some visuals, some words, some music, and just find some time to kind of get lost in God, to kind of let go of the voices that you hear, your job, your kids, things that are like constantly involved in your day, and to kind of break free from that and spend some focused time with God. And that's what I want us to do. And so this series is going to deal a lot with that. And we're going to get into defining what that is for us individually and as a group, collectively, what contemplative or contemplative prayer. I asked Matt what was the best way to say it, and he said, either way, we're good.
You asked me in a text message, and you said, how do you say it? And then you spelled it, and then you said "or," and you spelled it the same way. So
it's spelled the same way, no matter how
it
you say
is,
it.
and you pronounce it either way.
And we're going to get into defining that for a moment, but I want to kick back a little bit to the basics of prayer. I think the three of us, our church experience is very similar growing up, raised in church, youth group. We went to the same Bible college together, and then went into full-time ministry from there. And so prayer has its, I don't know, it has its, we've all had our experience with it. I want to kind of ask you and ask those of you out there that are watching, what is prayer? Like, define it. What is it? What's your experience been with prayer? And kind of like part B to that question is, how has it evolved? Is it the same as it was growing up? I know for me, it was very formulaic in youth group. And even as before that, in my family time, before I was a teen, it was mainly revolved around a meal that we would share, and it was very transactional. Very, God, this is what I want. Supply these things. God, give me what I want. And maybe there was a moment of thankfulness in there, but it was mainly like my request, my list to Santa. And my list to God of things I needed, from Him, and it became very rigid and very structured and very, matter of fact, growing up throughout my church life. But I know as things began to shift for me in my faith, prayer kind of took a back seat, because I began to question what it was, why we did it, what it meant. It didn't make sense. It wasn't answering the questions I had, and it kind of took a back seat in my journey with God, because I wasn't sure, I wasn't connecting like I thought I was supposed to connect with it. It wasn't doing what I thought it was supposed to do, and I kind of lost it at some point. And so I'm starting to rekindle a piece of that, of why I want it, what I want it to do, what it means, and all that. And so I wanted to kind of hear from you guys, your experience with prayer, from the start until where it's at now. So
I would push back a little bit on what you just said, because I believe that questioning, or even that, why are we doing this? I think that is a form of prayer. I'm with you guys that it was pretty transactional, cosmic vending machine, heavenly Santa, those kind of pieces. It was also a clearinghouse. Like, there was a whole lot of woe is me, I'm a worm, I'm horrible, a lot of confession to just kind of feel good about myself and relief, so to speak. And for me, prayer was also, I know we went to similar churches, but mine was a lot smaller, I think, and probably 2 generations earlier in the way that we did things. So there was a whole lot of Pentecostal, shaking and screaming and loud, and the fervency of your prayer was gauged by how loud you were and how active. And I think for me, what happened is prayer went to the other side of the coin, where I still believe that God was active in the here and now and listening and those kind of pieces, but it went into a more quiet place. It went to a more contemplative, as you're saying, and less focused on the activity and more on about still small voice. And then when I started studying and seeing other forms of Christianity and other traditions and religions around the world, basically prayer became for me a way of life. And so it's kind of the backdrop that's happening at all times. And that's kind of where I'm at now. That doesn't mean that there aren't times when I need to go outside and get loud and do my tongue talking and scream at God and those kind of pieces. But I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and. And so that's kind of how it's involved in my life.
So prayer for me, I can relate both to what you have kind of described initially. It was a lot of reacting to the needs present. So what do I need from God, and stating that, and bringing those needs in a way of in almost like a desperation, like please, like pleading. And at some point though, what I feel like it's evolved for me, because a lot of that didn't totally connect to my soul. I feel it was kind of a duty or an obligation or an expectation for where I was in faith. And so there was a lack of connection though to the part of my soul that I felt there should be, is as far as what I thought prayer would provide for me. So as it's kind of evolved, a couple things, I feel as though there's an incredible need in humanity for us to have a dependence on something other than ourselves. So there's often, for me, it's almost an acknowledgement that I am powerless without you, God. Like I have such a need to lift whatever is cluttering my mind or in my soul to you. It's almost like it's beneficial for my internal life and mind as much as it is to say I depend on you, because in my own strength I can't. Like I'm not able to be without God. So it's a way of life. It's a conversation that doesn't just happen in a moment at a time clock of 30 minutes. It's a mental release to say, mindfully, I'm going to turn, kind of come inward and just acknowledge that I have a need, because in my human strength, I'm not all there is. Like there's something above me. And so that dependence relationship is really key for me, because it helps remind me that that the world isn't about me, that it doesn't revolve around me or the things that I want, but it kind of calls God into the story with me, and I think that helps, helps my inward soul, feel at peace.
So what I want to look at then is what contemplative prayer is. Like, what is the difference? If you got the email that we sent earlier this week, there was a video from Richard Rohr that was kind of describing the meaning of it and the need for it. And one of the things he said that stood out to me was that prayer had been cheapened over the years, and he was referring even back to just 200 years after Christ, when Christianity became the religion of the government kind of deal. But for me, like that was my story in youth group. We were a part of a program called Buckeye Discipleship. We grew up in Ohio, and so that's, for some reason, they called it Buckeye Discipleship. It was horrible, and it's even hard to say that today. But it was like this process of this youth discipleship program that you would be a part of where you were to practice prayer at home and journaling and answering questions, and then you would do it all week long, and then you would bring in your filled out form to Sunday night church. And each day would show how you had to pray a certain amount of minutes every day, and then kind of write your prayers down there and then your answers. And then you turn them in for credit, like with what level of disciple you were. And I can remember every Sunday afternoon.
Did you get helmet stickers
We
or on your
didn't.
Bible or
didn't.
something?
We didn't. But we had to turn this in. And so I remember every Sunday evening having multiple pens in hand, filling out, like backfilling all the days with different.
Wait, did you write with both hands?
No, I didn't write with
You
both
have
hands.
multiple pens.
I had multiple pens.
So it
because-
looked like it was different
yeah, because,
entries.
Monday I had a blue pen.
You're
and
so smart.
Tuesday I had a black pen. Like, 'cause who has a blue pen 2 days in a row?
I do.
Not this kid. So I'm like filling out and making up time frames to make sure I got 45 minutes in, and then quickly jotted down prayers because I wanted them to think that I was praying. And when Roar says we've cheapened prayer, I'm like, I cheapened prayer personally when I did those things. And so I think that part of those pieces, like continued, that sowed so many seeds in my life where it lessened like what prayer was. I think that was hard. And so listening to Roar and some of the things that he says in here, and it's not new. We a lot of us have been experiencing this for years, but it's kind of new to the Grove. We haven't talked about it a lot. But this idea of kind of getting back to what it was. We needed a new word. Prayer wasn't working, so they came up with contemplative or contemplative, this idea of this focus back where it was, like Paul would say, praying all day long. It wasn't something that you could do, repeat worded prayer all day, but everything you did was this union with God. And so I want to turn that to you guys to kind of, what is that to you guys? What has contemplative prayer been for you? What's your experience been? How do you define it? And what's different about it? And why is it important that we journey in that?
So in my experience, learning to listen is not a gift of the American culture. We are not good listeners. And one of the very, probably the most influential part of contemplative practice for me is learning to listen, because there's a lot that we can hear inside our souls and minds if we take a pause and really give God an opportunity to speak. And so it's kind of a communion and a conversation that I feel when we rush and it is a list and it's transactional, we cannot get that peace. And so for me, like having contemplation or contemplative, there's reflection and there's listening. There has to be a self-evaluation piece for growth to take place. So if we are never to acknowledge, like, I lost my cool yesterday and I needed to acknowledge, hey man, that was off. My soul was off when I did that. And reflect on that. You're kind of inviting God into that piece of you. And so that's where what I imagine in my experience, it's this communion conversation where listening has to be utilized.
Yeah, all that's good. I think I'm remembering correctly. I'm reading a book by Rohr now called The Naked Now, learning how to see how the mystics see, and he has this talking about seeing with the third eye, and it sounds crazy and all that stuff. But what he's basically saying is there's this first eye where we look at the world as what's happening right now, and it's kind of that help or oh God or confession or those kind of pieces that's in the moment. And I think those are necessary. But then there's a second piece, that the second eye he talks about, is where we put in reason and we're meditating and we're listening, and it's this kind of piece where we're not just reacting in the moment, but we're literally engaging our reason and our mind on thinking and how do we handle that moment when I'm not in the urgent moment? So it's kind of a planning ahead and a prep, and it's a listening piece with God, and it's when we're in the scriptures and study. You know, the Jewish folk say that an hour of study is an hour of prayer. So it's that kind of piece. But then he talks about the third eye, and he talks about the third eye is what we're ultimately wanting to get in prayer, and that is union or oneness or communion. So that the third eye is what we're trying to do with contemplative prayer is we're cultivating and we are intentionally training ourselves to feel and experience presence. The presence of the God, the presence of the divine, the presence of Jesus in the here and now and in all moments. And so contemplation to me is, like she said, that listening, it's that third eye, but it kind of goes beyond that to where it's this intimacy of the presence of God. And we've talked about this before. I think you kind of know when a relationship gets to a place of maturity when you can be with your partner, or you can be with your spouse, and you don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
You just enjoy being with one another. Nicole's a lot better at that than I am. But I think that's what contemplation is, getting to the point to where that's what you're experiencing and feeling at all times or as much as possible.
So what I feel like I'm hearing from both of you and what we read is that it's not something you can just flip a switch and go from, man, you know, I pray for my meals here and there, and I pray at church, and sometimes I pray before I go to bed, to like the next day I'm in union with God in this moment. But it's something you practice, something you have to put effort into, something you said intentionally listening that needs to be a piece of it. I think Rohr describes it as this rewiring of our practices of what it looks like, what it means to be in union. And so I wanted to intro with that definition because this is what we're going to use as a tool moving through this series and something we are hoping that you can start practicing in your own personal journeys, this idea of prayer, but it becoming more intentional, more about, I guess, being in the presence of God longer than just a 5-minute thing here and there in your day, if I remember, to where we can actually bring meaning and purpose back to why we pray. And so what we're going to kind of transition into now is today's topic is the resurrection. I was looking at, well, what do we want to start with 2021 with? Like, where do we want to go with this? I could really use some hope or some joy, you know, coming off of that year, and with everything that just went on this last week, I was like, man, Easter, the story of Easter, resurrection is a couple months away. You know, we need something sooner, and I think we would agree that the resurrection story isn't something that needs to be limited to Easter morning. Right. It's something that can be lived and celebrated all year long, and that's what I wanted to start us off with. I wanted us to start off with the resurrection now. What does that look like for January 2021 to enter into this moment of hope and joy and celebration? And so this is how in our study this video curriculum that we're kind of watching together opens up like this. And I put this in the email, so some of you may have read this earlier in the week. The gift of resurrection is commonly believed to be a one-time experience. Jesus was resurrected once, and then all the good Christians will be resurrected with him when we all get to those revelation days, and we will all be happy then, right? This narrative is consistent with what the church commonly teaches, yet so inconsistent with the nature and character of God. An eventual one-time resurrection leaves so much to go wrong, whereas an ongoing, and I love this piece, it says, process of letting go, which is death, and letting in, healing, new life, enfoldment, the resurrection. So the letting go, the death piece of resurrection, and the letting in, the new life, yields to the ability to enjoy more of life's joy and satisfaction. That's the definition of resurrection, and that's how we enter into resurrection now. And so we're going to show this video real quick. We want you to watch it because then we're going to come back and we're going to discuss a few pieces of that video. And so we want you guys to be a part of that. So watch this video and we'll come right back.
Have you ever noticed in your own thought patterns, now this isn't highly philosophical, theological at all, you just observe your own mind. And if there's something negative or problematic, you will wrap around that immediately. Watch yourself. You can have even a moment of great joy, and it's hard to wrap around. It's hard to sustain happiness. It really is. You have to work. You have to choose. You have to clear away the garbage to sustain honeymoons and moments of happiness. They run away for some terrible reason. It's almost diabolical. I mean that. We're attracted to the negative.
I'd rather hold on to victimhood than...
Yeah. Joy is not easily sustained. We lose it in a moment. So I'm making the connection with resurrection. That resurrection has to be not just surrendered to, but has to be recognized as such. I'm feeling really content and full right now. How can I deeply say yes to that, and allow that? Now I admit there's some people who want to sustain it at a superficial level, which becomes addiction. And we're not talking about addiction. But resurrection is not our natural state. It's always a gift from God, but a gift from God that we have to assent to and choose and make our own. You don't have to believe anything. You just watch your own mind. And you're doing this every day, and I'm doing this every day, avoiding resurrection and choosing hell. Yeah. And when you think the negative commentaries that people write nonstop, for years on end about their first wife or the job they lost, or they really do dig a pit for themselves that pretty soon it's dug so deep. And now we know this is even true physiologically, that the neural grooves that you overuse become myelinated, defined, strengthened, and the ones you don't use die. This can be proven. If you never go to the neural groove of mercy, never. I don't practice mercy. By the time you're my age, you don't know how to be merciful anymore. That's why most old people are, as we say, set in their ways, not much fun to be around, if they've only kept affirming the same obsessive. See, most thinking is obsessive thinking. It took my contemplative practice to recognize that in myself, but then to help other people recognize it in themselves. That if you watch, you tend to think the same thing over and over and over again. It's why? What good is it after a while? So unless you jump out of that neural groove that you've over-practiced, now that's what you're doing in contemplation. You have the temptation to the resentful thought from the guy who did me in yesterday. All right, okay. You can go back to that, but you've thought it once. You've felt it through once. You really don't need to practice feeling resentment toward him for another 24 hours. You're doing yourself a favor, and you're doing the universe a favor, to move to another response and say, as my Father Francis taught us, those you think are your enemies are your greatest friends, because they're going to teach you exactly this, that you don't know how to love yet, that you're not in Christ, in love. You're in resentment is what you are. And when you're in resentment, you're not in Christ. The two can't coexist. So you see how I keep bringing it back to some kind of necessary meditation, contemplative practice, because otherwise people don't see these things. And ministers get up before huge congregations and preach an entire sermon on a good scripture, but out of a resentful mindset. It's largely not just a waste of time, but destructive.
It's like that, yeah.
So when he says in that video that we find ourselves running from resurrection and ultimately choosing hell is the words he uses, if we define resurrection as the letting go, the death piece, and the letting in the new life, why do we or how do we run from it, and maybe why do we choose the hell piece of it?
So, in my experience, I can see that I have formed habits in how I respond to negative situations that come up in my life. And so, without an intentional, intentional action, like to move to a different type of response, my habit will always be to go to that. So, like, and this could just be, I mean, you think of all the things that we experience, frustrations, somebody cuts in line in front of you, someone does you wrong, somebody mistreats you at work, your kids drive you crazy because they don't follow through. These might seem like little tiny blurbs like in the day, but if we have the habit of responding where our go-to is a negative response, frustration, resentment, just like what Richard Rohr was saying, that is our go-to. That's our mental habit. That's our mental go-to. So in contemplation, it's a challenge to break the habit. It's a challenge to move to a different type of response. And so when you're asking that, like, our habit is the choice to take ourselves, to keep our bodies, to keep our minds and our souls connected to that hell. Like that personal hell where we just don't feel at rest or at peace because it is what we are we have created the habit to go to. The resurrection is a different type of response because it's not letting those things that get us off course keep taking us off course. It's inviting new life. It's inviting a new way into how we respond to things that come our way. So it is a literal choice of a movement to a different response in order to find new resurrection now. But without that work, we as humans will constantly go to that negative pattern, and we will choose the hell over and over and over again. It is proven to see that is what we will do.
I think that's really true, and I've experienced that in my life. I think one of the things with when you talk about contemplation or contemplative prayer, another word that's in that kind of language or lexicon a lot is non-dual thinking, which is this idea of moving from either or to both and. And what I find healthy in those moments that you're referring to, where we're choosing a new way of thinking of resurrection over hell, as you asked, is that there has to be the acknowledgement of the hell, though. Mm-hmm. One of the most pivotal and life transformative thoughts that I've ever encountered happened last year when I was reading a guy named James Allison, and he basically pointed out the fact that after Christ is resurrected, Christ is referred to most often as crucified and risen Savior, and that he still carries the wounds of the cross. And so I think contemplation is doing what a lot of people call shadow work, where it is acknowledging the hell. It's not a either or, because I think some people think there has to be a switch where we are just Pollyannas, we're just super positive, and we deny that there's crap happening in our lives and that we're frustrated and that there is hell going on. But contemplation and moving to the resurrection is acknowledging that, holding it, even speaking to it, and saying, I understand, but there's another step of integration to where I see the pain, I see the hurt, I feel the resentment, but I'm choosing now, in spite of that, to walk in transformation and resurrection.
So, kind of want to practice something that he kind of led to in that video when it comes to wrapping around the negative. I want you guys each to share with me a moment of joy and a moment of pain or sorrow from 2020. A moment of joy and a moment of pain or sorrow that you experienced or that was experienced in 2020.
So, in keeping with what I just said, I want to give you one experience that was both negative and positive, and I think I've shared it. My sister's year and a half younger than me, and she ran away from home around 16, and basically, we haven't had a relationship for those 30 years. I'm 46, and it's been we just went two different ways, and there just wasn't a lot there to talk about or through. There was a lot of times that she was dealing with some habits or some attachments, addictions that didn't even allow us to have conversation. But this last year, I'm so proud of her. She got her 1-year chip 2 weeks ago of sobriety. And so there's this overwhelming joy and happiness that she's doing well. She's doing ministry. She's walking the streets of Birmingham at night handing out socks and hard-boiled eggs to the homeless. And we talk, and she's my sissy, which I don't ever remember calling her that, but now that's what we're doing. But there's also with that this pain of what could have been. Mm-hmm. And there's this pain of 30 years of us not being together. Mm-hmm. And so in that situation, it's literally in both ends. I reflect on that, and I'm sad, but at the same time, I'm so happy that her life's been transformed and our relationship is there. So that's my example for 2020.
Yeah. So what comes to mind, and honestly, like, I guess at this point, because, you know, it does feel comfortable because we're just the three of us here, and I'm not really sure who's watching or who's listening in, but we had a hard time this summer when a lot of the social unrest and racial unrest came to the forefront. I mean, it's been going on. Obviously, we have to acknowledge that, but it came to the forefront. There was no looking away, and it was what is both joy and both pain is that Jeff and I really had to evaluate. We had to evaluate a response that, number one, would hold to our integrity and that we would be proud of in communicating to our kids, that 10 years, 20 years from now, that we would be able to say we went and took the step that we believed was right, and that it was the good example that not only do we want to set for our children, but for this community. Our hearts were behind peace and wanting to draw people together, wanting to acknowledge those fellow brothers and sisters that like are residing with us in this country that feel overlooked and overshadowed. So, you know, having initiated this Black Lives Matter unity rally in our community, we saw beauty. Yeah. We saw unity. We saw celebration of one another. We saw people coming and saying, thank you. Thank you for being a voice. Like, we have not felt this way. And at the same time, we felt so much pain. And not even like as a white woman who does not know what it's like to walk in the person of color's shoes, I cannot speak to that. But what I can say is that in our own personal experience, like losing friendships, having people speak against our family and say things towards us, it was both and. There was so much joy because I felt proud of what we chose and the example that in the conversations it brought up in our home, and being able to like talk with our kids and just like walk through history with them. It was amazing, but at the same time there was just a lot of pain. It was both and. There was both the joy and both the pain. So
I was gonna, Matt started off by saying it was all in one moment, and I thought you were gonna go there with the same thing I was gonna share, and then Jody, sure enough, you did. For me as well, the moment of joy and the moment of pain was all encompassed in one moment. The excitement of the conversations I was having with my family, to see my 9-year-old craft.
That was beautiful.
A letter that she wanted to read to everyone, where she stood on the idea of Black Lives Mattering. We knew that we wanted to be on the right side of history here and make this stand, and we evaluated the cost. I think a lot of people thought we just jumped into it and we didn't think about it. We evaluated or counted the cost. We knew that it would be painful. It would, there would be some loss in there. But still, you heard the things that were said about us personally on Facebook. We had people threatening violence against us and things like that. A little bit of disappointment in maybe the silence from our friends that knew these people, that were family with these people. That kind of, you kind of remember those things. I guess I don't hold them at fault, but you feel those things. You're like, hey, that's your cousin saying that. You might want to, maybe could you say something to me that we're friends? He might not say that anymore. Or just, my conversations with law enforcement, or knowing the people that are in our community that have voices that shared lies, that shared fear, that told stories, tried to get, people, upset and angry that this was happening. And then the friends that were close to us afterwards and prior to it, to say, we can't be with you anymore. We can't go to your church. We can't, our friendship has to kind of change now because, and there wasn't, I don't know. There was a lot of things left hanging of like, what do we do? What am I missing here? And so that moment for me was a moment of joy and a moment of pain, something that we dealt with. But I don't know what it is like for you guys, but for me, and I know Richard Rohr in the video, brings out this point that it's much easier to remember the negative from 2020.
Absolutely.
Like if you said, hey, give me a list of negatives and a list of positives from 2020, I think my list of negatives, that were for me or for our country would be exhaustive, and I'm like trying to remember, well, what was another piece of joy from that year? I think it would be harder because our minds want to wrap around the negative piece. He says this, it's hard to sustain happiness. You have to work, you have to choose, you have to clear away the garbage, but for some terrible reason, it's almost diabolical is what he says. We are attracted to the negative. How does that show? Like, why is that? Why is it so much easier for us to get stuck in the negative?
Well, I mean, some of the material we were reading this week says it was an evolutionary advantage. In other words, back in the day when we were running from saber-toothed tigers and those kind of pieces, it was survival. So it was continual remembering what was a scary moment or what was a hard moment or what was a bad moment, because it kept us alert enough to survive. And that person goes on to say that was helpful in that moment. It might not be helpful in the hallways of middle school for you to remember that way, which is why contemplation as a practice, as an intentional movement and as an intentional thing you do and set regularly in your life is so important, because even our neurological hardwiring, our myelination, as he said, is set to keep us to think about that. I mean, think about the times when you've done something at school or you've done somewhere and you have 99 people say, that was awesome, that was great, this was it. And then there's the one that doesn't, and it's that one negative voice that stands out over all of them. So our own brains are against us, and we have to intentionally create those neurological grooves, pathways, ways of not living in the resentment, but living in the resurrection. So I think that's real important. And let me just say this, because you guys brought up that Black Lives Matter and someone who was involved with it and watched what was happening to you guys. Whenever you choose to do right, there's going to be this, right? I mean, when Jesus says, "Come follow me," he the way he mentions it is take up your cross. And I'm not saying that to you, I know you know that, but I'm saying to you guys out there that there is always a cost for doing right in the world. And if and I'm not talking about this in some weird kind of masochistic way, but if there's not periodically those times in your life that you doing something for Jesus or standing up on the behalf of your brother and sister, if your life doesn't have that pain periodically, then you may not be following firmly in the steps of the Nazarene named Jesus. We have to do that.
You brought up the neurological grooves, and that's something he speaks to in the video, the practicing of these neuro grooves, that if we continue these practices, and you reached on this, Jody, where you said if our constantly is to choose the opposite, is to choose the negative, our mind goes there first. Our mind, will go there. And if we don't begin to, through contemplative prayer and contemplation, practice these positive grooves, we'll never get there. And he references mercy. He says if you're unable to ever practice mercy or go to that point of being merciful, you'll never get there. Like if you don't intentionally practice mercy or forgiveness or love, it just won't become natural. It'll never be natural for you. It'll be very hard. He says contemplation is necessary. Unless you jump out of that neural groove that you have over practice, that's what you're doing in contemplation. You're doing yourself a favor. You're doing the universe a favor when you move to a different response. And so what does that mean for you guys? And like maybe how have you practiced that? Has it shown up anywhere where you're, where that kind of fleshed out for you?
So I have tried to evaluate situations that come my way. I think I've kind of know the difference now, and but it's a practice. I think that we can be reactors and we can be responders, and he talks about this in this piece. And those two words stood out to me because when we react, we often regret. We often regret what we do because we react in the moment. Our anger flushes out. Our temper comes. We're not patient. We're not kind. We go to the negative. Whatever, fill in the blank. Whatever it is, we all have that kind of the thing that it is our thing. When you choose to respond, there's often, for me, I have to challenge myself to take a deep breath, to walk away, to not say anything, to say, I'm not in a good place to respond right now. Give me just a moment. I don't always do that well, but that is something that as I've tried to implement, it is so helpful. Sometimes when I give myself 24 hours to respond to something, it is like night and day what comes out. And instead of reacting in the moment, we often regret what comes out. But when you are able to give yourself the moment to pause, to walk away, to maybe disengage with whatever it is that's right here in front of you, we have to set a boundary sometimes before we react. So that to me is that practice is because those grooves, the neural grooves that he's talking about that are just the negative, it is literally like a hamster wheel, and we will never come off of it unless we practice taking ourselves away.
Yeah, maybe a lot of you wouldn't realize this, but I'm incredibly critical in not a positive way. It goes way back to my great-grandfather, and there's people in my family who carry it around, but I am, there's a right way to do something and a wrong way to do it, and it often shows up in my family with Nicole or with other really close people where I'm just nitpicky, and I just go on that, and that's that groove that's happening right there. So this idea of taking a pause, taking a breath, walking away is a good thing. Nicole helped me really early on because I'd come home and this wouldn't be done and this wouldn't be done and this wouldn't be done. And oftentimes it was really me angry at myself, but I would project it onto her. And I would say, like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? And she would look at me and she'd say, quick, 3 positive things right now. And I don't know where she got that from, if it was a tool or it's just intuition on her part, but it really has been helpful to kind of think through that way. And I think sometimes when we think of practicing contemplative prayer, we're thinking of monks, or we're thinking of some kind of yoga pose, or we're thinking about Lectio Divina or Ignatian Examen or whatever it is. But sometimes it's as simple as having a gratitude journal where you just write down the things that you're grateful for, or it's training yourself. If I say something negative, I'm going to say 3 positive things at this point. Yeah. So I even with your kids, just practicing high-low disco, right? What's every day, teaching them, okay, what's something that was really good about today? Okay, what was something that wasn't so good at disco? What was that weird thing that happened today? And so, again, these can be built into our lives in really non-churchy, non-spiritual, weird ways. We can just practice this.
Yeah. And so this is how we're going to conclude this morning. I know we went a few minutes longer, but I really wanted to make this a piece for us this morning because I don't imagine a lot of us are practicing this. And so where do we start? Where do we go from here? How do we install or practice these neuro grooves that are positive to reinforce, to fight against the negative? And throughout the week and throughout the series, we're going to put things out there, some ideas for you to practice. But one thing I wanted Matt to lead us in is just a moment today of walking us through a practice of contemplative prayer together. And it's something that you can redo again throughout the week, or watch this later and fast forward to the end. And experience this. But Matt's going to lead this, and this is how we'll end. It'll be a prayer, and we'll close from there.
So this is a form of prayer, and there are many ways to do this, but it's called the Ignatian Examen, okay, or Ignatian Examen prayer. And Ignatius of Loyola basically came up with this hundreds of years ago, but it's a way to engage your imagination and your memories. And so the prayer is meant to just take it straight out of your cognitive center and to kind of flesh it out. And so when you pray this prayer, typically you're praying it in the evening or in the morning of a day, reflecting on the past 24 hours or the past amount of time, and then envisioning the next day. So it's a way of acknowledging what was there, both the good and the bad, and then projecting into the day coming. I'm not going into this day unprepared so that I just react. I'm going to be aware of it so that I can respond. And so there is an invitation, there's a reflection, there's a relishing, there's a pondering, there's a beholding. Okay, I just want to go ahead and kind of give you that frame. Now, if you'll just get comfortable, sit up in your chair, just become in tune with your breath, not some magical thing, but just being present in this moment and hopefully non-distracted, I'm going to lead us through this. And I'm going to do more of an abbreviated version because of our time, but I do want to just give you the template, okay? So let's just pause, take a deep breath, maybe 2 or 3. And you just breathe in, feel that breath enter into your lungs, feel what it does to your body, hold it, and then breathe out. So inhale, hold, and exhale. Let's do that 2 more times. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Last time. Inhale. Hold. Feel the weight in your lungs. And exhale. Let's invite the presence of God. Lord, you're here. We know we swim in you. And at the same time, we acknowledge your presence in our every moments. But we ask you in this moment to fill our hearts and fill our minds with you. We acknowledge, we invite you into this reflection. We invite you into this moment. We invite you in the hours to come. God, be in our minds and in our understanding, be in our eyes and in our seeing, be in our mouths and in our speaking, be in our hearts and in our thinking, and be at our end and at our departing. So the next step we want to do is we want to spend a few minutes. And if you're alone, you might want to journal this or you may not, but we want to reflect. We want to reflect on the day, the last 24 hours. We want to think about those things. And we want to think about those things with gratitude. We're thankful you gave us another day, God. We'll start to think through what happened yesterday, what happened in the morning. Just kind of chronicle, go through the events of the day, paying special attention to those that want to jump to the forefront of your mind. We have gratitude that you gave us breath. We have gratitude that we have people in our lives who love us. We have gratitude for friends and family. We have gratitude for your presence. And we're moving into this next step of relishing. What were the moments where you felt connection with God or the divine? What was a moment where you felt alive? Was it a taste of a pastry or a leftover that you loved? Was it a video you saw or a laugh or a joke that came your way? What was a moment where you felt not just aliveness but love? Your highest self. Where was a moment where you felt joy? Just take that, acknowledge it, and thank God for that. Thank you for those moments. God, I thank you for the time with Nicole yesterday, the conversation that we had. I thank you for my conversation with my sister. Thank you for that feeling of aliveness. And now we move into the next stage of this reflection, which is pondering. And we want to ponder that moment where we felt disconnected from God, where we were frustrated or negative. Maybe we were exhausted, our idea of our lowest self. Where did you feel that yesterday? What pain did you experience? What was a moment where you felt grief or you felt disconnect? A moment when you had relational rift with your spouse or your children or your friends or a stranger on Facebook. Where was that? We want to ponder it. We want to acknowledge it. God, I acknowledge the pain I felt from that comment, that message that was sent to me on Facebook yesterday. I acknowledge that it hurt. Don't want to sugarcoat over that. I want to acknowledge it so that I can see your movement in it. I want to sit with those words of criticism, and if your Spirit has anything to say to me through that moment, I don't want to hurry past that. I don't want to be defensive. I want to let that in and learn. And so now, after we have recognized and invited God's presence into this moment, and we've reflected on our day with gratitude, relishing those moments of joy and connection and aliveness, and pondering on those moments of frustration and negative energy, we want to behold. We want to behold this day with new hope. What new hope does our reflection of this past day inspire? More moments of aliveness, other ways of connecting with you, O God, such as this, and maybe learning from and speaking to those moments of negativity so that there can be healing and that there can be restoration. We thank you for a new day, a new chance to be your hands and feet to this world. Help us to contemplate and to develop the ability to not just run to hell or to listen to that groove in our minds that would have us to resent, but teach us to run towards resurrection, to embody that moment in this day coming up. Think about the people that you can reach out and love to. Think about the opportunities you have to make things right. Think about the ability to be a conveyor and a dealer of resurrection for the next 24 hours, whether it's with your spouse or your children or your friends or coworkers or even your enemies. May we realize this moment, the opportunities that lie before us to be we, not us and them. And God, we know you're here. And we thank you again for being with us each day, not only the day we've just reflected on and the day that we're about to experience, but each day hereafter. Teach us to live with you in communion and oneness, to, as our scriptures say, to abide in you. So God, be in our heads and in our understanding, be in our eyes and our seeing, be in our mouths and our speaking, be in our hearts and our thinking, and be at our ending as we are and you are at our departing. We love you and you're a good God. Amen.
Thank you guys, and we'll see you next week.